There's an amazingly powerful and broken build that is in Baldur's Gate 3, but of course it's also useful in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And we're not talking about breaking the inventory system using the Barrelmancer from Baldur's Gate 3. If you're trying to actually roleplay, having a giant stack of barrels on your back doesn't really seem to make sense. No, I'm talking about using just your abilities as the character, because we're going to be building what is affectionately referred to as the machine gun build. The machine gun build relies on one very important ability, but because Baldur's Gate 3 happens to tweak the classes a little bit, it happens to be even more powerful if used properly. And we can mix in another special build halfway through to make it even more powerful. But let's go ahead and jump in and not waste any more time. When you take your first level, all that matters is you put as many points as you can into Charisma, followed by your Dexterity and Constitution. That's going to make it so we have 17 in Charisma, but don't worry, we will eventually round that number out to make it a bit more useful. Then, very importantly, we're going to be starting with Warlock. When you take your first level in Warlock, you get some very special spell casting. And what's so special about this spell casting is that it recharges on a short rest. That's going to be very important to keep in mind later. Another important thing that you get when you take your first level in Warlock is that you happen to get light armor proficiency. We're going to use that later as well. But the most important thing about taking your first level in Warlock is that you get access to a cantrip that no other class does, and that's Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast is the core of this build, because it doesn't just increase in overall damage dice that you would roll like most other cantrips. No, Eldritch Blast happens to level up the amount of blasts or beams that shoot out when you use this cantrip.
I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
And the cantrip levels up with your overall character level, not with how many levels you take in Warlock. And when you're playing Baldur's Gate, the max level is 12, and cantrips level up at level 5 and level 11. So if you're only maxing out within the Baldur's Gate world, you happen to have 3 beams per casting of Eldritch Blast. So you're going to want to keep that in mind for later. Then at second level of Warlock, you get some Eldritch Invocations. And this is where we get to really make you powerful, because there's 2 very important Eldritch Invocations that you want to take. The first one's going to be Agonizing Blast, because this allows you to add your Charisma modifier to every single beam that shoots out of your Eldritch Blast. And then the second Eldritch Invocation you want to grab, because it's especially powerful in Baldur's Gate 3, especially with how the landscapes work, is going to be Repelling Blast. This allows you to push an enemy every time you hit them with an Eldritch Blast. And that means you're going to constantly be pushing creatures off of cliffs. I'm sure if you're playing a D&D session in real life, it will drive your Dungeon Master insane enough that they will never add cliff faces to any battle maps in the future. But in Baldur's Gate 3, it's already built, so too bad. I use this against everything from goblins to master vampire lords, and it always worked and always saved me a ton of headache in battle. So once you get to that level 11 with Eldritch Blast, you can push one creature 3 times, or you can push 3 different creatures once. So if you strategically make your way to the very center of a battle map and make sure to push everybody else away from you, it is insanely powerful. Why we call it a machine gun build is because of all the blasting you're doing with your Eldritch Blast. But just shooting 3 beams doesn't feel like a full-blown machine gun with your Eldritch Blast, so we need to amp that up a bit, and we're going to do that with a multi-class. Instead of taking your 3rd level in Warlock, what we're going to do is jump over to Sorcerer. When you take your first level in Sorcerer, you get to choose what type of Sorcerer you want to be, and personally, I go with Draconic Bloodline. This gives us 2 very important benefits. The first of which being that you get extra health. You get 1 more hit point per level in Sorcerer, because dragons have a lot of health. You also get to choose what type of dragon was in your ancestral blood, but that might not be quite as relevant. But personally, I like going with whatever fire dragon works best, because I like fire dragons. The other benefit is that because of your draconic ancestry, you can use your own slightly scaly skin as armor, making your default armor class 13 plus your dexterity modifier, but we're going to be relying on leather armor anyway, so that doesn't really matter. Then when you take your 2nd level in Sorcerer, you get some sorcery points, and those are going to be pretty darn helpful. In both Baldur's Gate 3 and D&D 5th edition, you can trade your sorcery points for spell slots, or trade in your spell slots for sorcery points. But in 5th edition, that was a little less useful at this level because you didn't have anything to spend sorcery points on until 3rd level. However, in Baldur's Gate 3, they fixed that. So now you get meta magic options right at 2nd level of Sorcerer. They are slightly limited though, so we can take distance spell, so that way we can shoot our Eldritch Blast a little further, and we can take Twin Spell just in case there's anything we do actually want to cast that would only target one creature. But then once you reach 3rd level in Sorcerer, in both Baldur's Gate 3 and D&D 5th edition, you get full-blown meta magic options. And this is where we're going to take the meta magic option, Quicken Spell. This makes it so any spell casting you would do that would take an action, you can now cast that same spell as a bonus action. But it is very important to note that in Baldur's Gate 3, it costs 3 sorcery points to use Quicken Spell, but in D&D 5th edition, it only costs 2 sorcery points. But that doesn't matter because we're going to just be banking as many sorcery points as we possibly can either way. So now if you use Quicken Spell on your Eldritch Blast, you can use Eldritch Blast twice in one turn. Once as your action and once as your bonus action, allowing you to cast 3 beams as your action and 3 beams as your bonus action, for a total of 6 beams. That means you can blast 6 different targets away from you if you really feel like it, or push one target really far away. But we don't have to stop there because we have more multi-classes that will definitely work. But I should definitely note that we've just taken care of the core part of what makes this build work. So everything beyond this point, you can mix and match where you want to take the levels. Because part of where we're going doesn't work in 5th edition, but it definitely works in Baldur's Gate 3. But don't worry, I'll call it out when we get there, because we're going to do another multi-class right away. And now it's time to jump over to Fighter. When you take your first level in Fighter, you get a fighting style, and we're going to take the defense fighting style. This gives us a +1 to our armor class as long as we're wearing any kind of armor. So the fact that our first level was in Warlock, giving us proficiency in light armor, means that we can actually use this fighting style. Then once you hit 2nd level in Fighter, you get Action Surge, which means that you can take 2 actions in a single turn once per short or long rest. So now you can use Eldritch Blast with your action, Eldritch Blast with your Action Surge, and use Quicken Spell to cast it one more time as your bonus action. But we don't have to stop there, because here is where Baldur's Gate 3 is a little different than 5th edition. If you're sticking with 5th edition, take 1 more level in Warlock and the rest in Sorcerer, so that we can get as many sorcery points as possible, and Warlock will upgrade their spell slots to 2nd level. But if you're playing Baldur's Gate 3, there's one key difference in a Rogue subclass. So we're going to go ahead and take another multi-class into Rogue. When you take your first level in Rogue, you get some expertise and access to sneak attack, but we don't care too much about that stuff. All we care is about doing more blasting. Then at 2nd level of Rogue, you get Cunning action, allowing you to do some different stuff with your bonus action, but we don't care too much about that anyways because we're using our bonus action to do more blasting. But at 3rd level of Rogue in Baldur's Gate 3, we're going to take the Thief subclass. There's a reason for this, because the Thief subclass, only in Baldur's Gate 3, makes it so you can have 2 bonus actions in a single turn. So now you can use Quicken Spell twice, meaning that you can cast Eldritch Blast as your action, you can cast Eldritch Blast as your Action Surge, you can cast Eldritch Blast as your first bonus action, and then again as your second bonus action. So it feels like a full-blown machine gun because you're doing 12 shots in a single turn. But now you still have 2 levels left to play around with in Baldur's Gate 3 because the max level is 12. So take 1 more level in Sorcerer, because then you get a feat, and you can use that feat on something like Actor, which will boost your charisma by 1 point, as well as giving you proficiency in a few more skills. But all that matters is that you boost your charisma at least to a more usable level, because that boosts your accuracy with your Eldritch Blast beams, as well as boosting the damage thanks to Agonizing Blast. And then with your last level, go ahead and take 1 more level in Warlock. That makes it so you boost your Warlock spell slots to 2nd level, and that's especially powerful because of the other feature that works in this overall build, and that's a Coffee Lock. So a Coffee Lock is something that works in 5th edition as well as Baldur's Gate 3. In Baldur's Gate 3 specifically, you can take 2 short rests for every 1 long rest you would take. So what you're going to want to do is take every single spell slot you have and dump them into sorcery points. And you can use those Warlock spell slots for more sorcery points. But even better than that, those Warlock spell slots recharge on short rests, so that gives you more sorcery points to play around with because you can just recharge them on that short rest and dump more sorcery points in, meaning that you have far more ammo in your Eldritch Blast machine gun, allowing you to blast out 12 beams on your first turn in between every rest you take, followed by another 9 beams on every other turn after that, as long as you got the sorcery points to spare. And you can use each one of those to push people away and possibly off of cliffs, just making the combat that much shorter. I spent way too much time in Baldur's Gate 3. It basically devoured my life for a bit, so I wanted to make sure I did a build to at least make use of all of that time I spent. If there's anything you do differently about this build, let me know in the comments down below. And if you want access to the character sheet to be able to use this in 5th edition, go ahead and check out my Patreon, linked in the description down below, where I have access to character sheets for all of my builds. And a special thank you to those player character patrons: CGC 2014, Afstorm, Godzilla Khan, Mugen, Elisa Martinez, Anthony McDonald, Panda Milkshake, Alistar Nix, Ted Z, Andrew Nobles, Carcat Kitsune, Zed13, Viral Naravar, Kesta, The Dino 21, Chris Moke, and Benjamin. And going even beyond that are the patrons I play D&D with: Shane Gilroy, ConmanZX, Cybersiety, Talon Starkey, Braden Aldridge, Daniel Galvin, Michael, Eric Wade, Salvador, Devin Happy, and Kilo Kilo. Then going above and beyond anything I ever expected is my god tier level patron GameSteak, so an unreasonably special thank you to him. If you made it all the way to the end of this build, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here hoping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to just blast everybody off the map and use a machine gun coffee lock build.